German Chancellor rebukes Vance for supporting party that downplays Nazis. Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany on Saturday accused Vice President JD Vance of unacceptably interfering in his country's imminent elections on behalf of a party that has played down the atrocities committed by the Nazis 80 years ago. A day after Mr. Vance stunned the Munich Security Conference by telling German leaders to drop their so-called firewall and allow the hard-right alternative for Germany, or AfD, to enter their federal government, Mr. Scholz accused Mr. Vance of effectively violating a commitment to never again allow Germany to be led by fascists who could repeat the horrors of the Holocaust. A commitment to never again is not reconcilable with support for the AfD, Mr. Scholz said at the conference on Saturday morning in an address opening the gathering's second day. Mr. Scholz said the AfD trivialized Nazi atrocities like the concentration camp at Dachau, which Mr. Vance visited on Friday. The Chancellor said Germany would not accept suggestions from outsiders about how to run its democracy or directives to work with such a party. That is not done, certainly not among friends and allies, Mr. Scholz said. Where our democracy goes from here is for us to decide. Attendees at Mr. Vance's speech have been expecting to hear details of the Trump administration's plans for Ukraine peace talks and NATO defense policies. On Saturday, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine himself put the focus on the Ukraine war in his remarks, starkly laying out the threat from Russia's battle-hardened military and making an impassioned appeal for Europeans to take their security into their own hands, including by forming an army of Europe that would supplement U.S. power on the continent. His speech drew standing ovations in contrast to Mr. Vance's speech the day before. Mr. Scholz's comments underscored a growing unease among Europe's leaders about their relationship with the United States and their own domestic politics. They came as leaders scrambled at the summit to formulate a response to President Trump's sudden shift in Ukraine policy and the possibility that he could cut the continent out of negotiations. Just a few days before Mr. Vance's remarks, Mr. Trump threatened to impose new tariffs on virtually every country the United States trades with. Then he spoke of negotiating an end to Russia's war in Ukraine directly with President Vladimir Putin of Russia, leaving Europeans, including Ukraine, wondering if they would be included. Poland's foreign minister said at the conference that President Emmanuel Macron of France had called an emergency meeting of European leaders to discuss Ukraine on Sunday. At the same time, far-right parties across Europe have gained ground by tapping into unease over immigration, which also helped propel Mr. Trump back to power in the United States. Mr. Vance's comments suggested that a new kind of American alliance with Europe was forming, one that bypasses the official leadership in favor of movements like Germany's AfD and France's National Rally. Saturday's sessions of the Security Conference were dominated by reactions predominantly negative to Mr. Vance's speech and Mr. Trump's agenda. Mr. Scholz was joined in his criticism by Friedrich Merz, his rival as the Chancellor candidate for the conservative Christian Democrats, who polls suggest is the favorite to be Germany's next leader. Mr. Vance spent much of his speech on Friday scolding Europeans for what he suggested were Soviet-style restrictions on free speech across the continent. On Saturday, Mr. Merz defended Germany's laws that prohibit particular forms of speech, including hate speech, and ban Nazi slogans, including on social media. He also suggested that Mr. Trump's administration was suppressing speech in the United States after it moved on Friday to kick the Associated Press out of reporting pools and off Mr. Trump's plane because the news agency refuses to go along with Mr. Trump's directive to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. "We stick to the rules which are given by our democratic institutions," Mr. Merz said. "Free speech remains free speech and remains part of our open democratic society. And fake news, hate speech, and offenses remain subject to legal restraints and controlled by independent courts. I think I should say," he added, "that in front of the events which took place in D.C. yesterday, we would never kick out the news agency out of the press room of our Chancellor."